So yeah, Holy Land is a manga that I've heard about for a little while, even though I didn't know anything about it. I did know that the author is behind. No, he's overseeing the continuation of Berserk after, because he was a friend of Kentaro Miura, and I guess they talked about Berserk a lot and what he had planned. And yeah, so he's working with the assistants, but apparently I might be mixing up authors, but anyway. So yeah, Holy Land is a street fighting manga that which I wasn't aware about. So it's like, which is it's pretty neat. It's just pretty grounded. It very much discusses like delinquency and like hikikomori. The main character is a hikikomori, or was a hikikomori, but he went to street fighting to sort of like to find a place in the world, as he phrases it. Yeah, it was pretty neat. Like maybe bad timing, because I literally just read like a really grounded martial arts manga that was called Hajime no Ippo, that was also 137 volumes long, and it was really fucking good. So like I liked Holy Land, but it definitely didn't fill a place in my heart that I needed to be filled when I feel like because it's definitely a manga I can see as being inspirational if it connects to you at a certain like point in your life. Like it's good at what it does. It just it didn't click with me majorly. Like it's good. I liked it. There were definitely some moments that I liked about, and some ideas that I thought were neat. Like and some stuff that I haven't really seen that often. Like I thought it was interesting how like the author isn't a character in his own manga, but his voice is still very present. Like I've almost never that I can remember see like the narration or the refer to, like it's just be the author speaking about himself and his experiences at times, because like it's a street fighting manga. He's done a lot of research that he expressly mentions on martial arts and stuff, and so like there are times when he references things that are like regarding his personal experiences of like what it feels like to get hit, or like I think there's one instance where like I think he mentioned that it was based on his personal experience where like, oh, even if a girl says she likes a wild boy, she very, very rarely, if ever, likes seeing actual violence in front of her, which came up once. I think he mentioned like having an actual experience relevant to that, or just like alluded to it basically, because he doesn't really talk about himself much, but he more just alludes to things or implies them again based on just the way the voice sounds. Definitely feels like there's a lot of like his subjective, like what he's understood and felt and seen personally, which I think is sort of important to note, because I was even thinking about reading it as like, what if someone read this and decided I'm going to become an actual street fighter? Kind of like art can inspire people to do things like I'm going to go into science, or I'm going to make manga, follow your dreams, kids. And except this one's about street fighting, so, and it's got like very in-depth, like it talks about the martial arts and gives potential like advice for fighting, and like it comes from someone who has experience with fighting. I don't know if the author has actually street fought a lot, or if at all, but he's definitely, I'm pretty sure it sounds like he's at least been in like sparring and the like very minimum. But I guess what I'm trying to say is if you like use this manga as like advice, you probably deserve to get beaten up. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. And like the martial arts was also like, it was especially neat because when we typically hear about martial arts, it's in the context of like these professional, ring or gym, dojo as it would be, I guess, in certain, a lot of the martial arts mentioned here. And in these professional environments, there's, a lot of drive to, be safe and not permanently injure yourself, where in a street fight, that doesn't matter. Like, if you do a judo throw in a, again, professional environment, like you're trained to take the fall, it's a relatively, padded flooring. If you do it on the streets, it's asphalt. People can get seriously hurt. And, or like karate, with how like a lot of its moves make sense in actual combat, but don't necessarily like, in like very specific situations, like they mentioned the karate chop, which is trained, it's like a single downward motion, and that's not really good in a fight generally. But if like an opponent is like rushing you and trying to grab you around the waist, like that karate chop can hit them on the back of the head, and the spot specifically that could cause brain damage or kill them, right? Like, or they mentioned a move that's like good at dealing with people with holding weapons, and it's like no one's actually going to be holding a weapon in a professional match, right? But again, it was specifically the author's personal opinions and experiences that like one thing I thought was interesting, because he mentions MMA as being like a very quickly evolving sport, and this manga came out like what, 10, 15 years ago. Okay, yeah, but more like 10 to 20. It started in 2000 and it ended in 2008. And in that time period, MMA has blown the fuck up, right? And I imagine it's evolved even further than it was at 2006, 2008 when those chapters were published. So I guess like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that people using it as a reference, or just because I've learned some things, but I'm also aware that it's just the perspectives of this one guy and a 14-year-old experience at minimum. For the last chapters. But yeah, it was interesting to learn about. And I guess the other angle that I actually knew quite a bit about coming in was the whole delinquency stuff, where it's what I assume happened is around the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a crackdown on teen violence and delinquency and stuff, because Shibuya 15 also sort of discusses it, which where the whole thing is a rehabilitation for delinquent teenagers, and this manga sort of opens up talking about how by restricting the violence these teens can have, they're not going to stop being violent, they're just going to do it where they can't be watched, where it might even be more dangerous for them. One thing that kind of comes up is the divide between the quote-unquote positive violence of just delinquents fighting each other, having their freedom in their youth that they eventually grow out of, as in manga like Ashita Joe, where in the early part of the manga the main characters are all at a correctional facility, and they eventually leave it and become functioning members of society. Or Hajime no Ippo, where half a dozen characters off the top of my head either came from delinquent violence or just violence on the streets and became boxers, right? It's something that that a youth might be caught up in, but eventually they're supposed to grow up and get out of it. But then there's also the negative side of that, where the people who don't necessarily get out or grow up out of the delinquency thing and just go use that as a road to become criminals, drugs come up at the end. And I guess I was also thinking about Tokyo Revengers, and just how delinquent manga were more common, it felt back before the 2000s or post 2000s. Even Tokyo Revengers kind of observes a lot of the mid 2000s, even though it was coming out 10 or a decade after that. But even there's very much this divide between the quote-unquote good delinquency that you grow out of, and then the delinquents who become criminals and become these drains on society in a way. And so the manga is very much discussing that as well. But yeah, it's definitely the kind of manga where it's if it connects with you, you probably really, really fucking like it. So in my case, that didn't happen with me, so I only I just like it. But I guess to move into spoilers, to talk about some more specifics, I was asked, because the person who suggested this just wanted to know they weren't 100% sure what Holyland was at the ending. They didn't fully get it, they felt. I kind of just especially after reading the first chapter where it talked about this the sort of relationship between delinquents and these kids with the law, I just sort of figured it was probably freedom. And it was more or less stated directly, but in the last chapters, that the Holy Land is it's between the world of adults and kids, where it's it's a growing up thing. Again, that sort of finding a spirit of freedom as a kid to take with you into adulthood, because these characters, even Masaki's a good example, because he had his whole thing with his father, where he's trapped by his father being a coward, and he doesn't want to be a coward, so he's trying to be tough and strong, but he ends up again, he's trapped by that. And then when that goes wrong for him, he starts to run away from that. He goes to the streets. So he's still a strong martial artist, but he's he's not doing what he would, what would be ideal for him, because he's so fixated on his past and trying to not be trapped by that. When, as the manga ends, he goes to become a kickboxer, but because he's finally stopped running away and accepted, he's great, yeah, grown up and graduated from the streets, but he still has that spirit of freedom, and he's able to do what he wants, basically, finally. Like, he's able to also, strength, self-improvement is also a big part of that. Like with you, where he was bullied and didn't have a place in the world, so he just found, attempted to, well, first he attempted suicide and it didn't work out. He didn't want to do that, so instead he just built himself up and found his strength, and, eventually, I especially like the way they frame his, like, getting multiple techniques from the people that he fights as, like, he's forming these bonds with these people, like, because, his whole thing was his loneliness, and by taking these techniques from the people he fought against, he's no longer alone, because these people also went through these experiences in their own ways, and he's, grown from them. And yeah, that was good. I think my favorite moment in the manga was probably, like, it ended up being related to Shogo, where it's like, he had his whole thing with his dad, and, like, trying to find what strength is for, and, to protect what's important to you, and then, like, he remembered his friends, and yeah, it was good. And yeah, like, one thing that was nice was, like, because you started out the manga, like, he wanted to be validated, he wanted it to be, seen for who he was, but then as he kept fighting, he found out that that wasn't actually what he was looking for, necessarily. Like, he became strong enough to not just need validation. Like, he still didn't value himself at that point, but he was recognizing that, like, relying on the value of subscribed to you from others doesn't necessarily, like, make up for that. And yeah, he grew in some good directions. Like, seeing his struggle was nice. The manga ending with, I did not expect him to get fucking stabbed. And I feel like, like, just reading it literally, like, he lived and he still defends people on the streets. Part of me wants to see that as more of, like, a symbolic thing, where it's like, like the narration says Yu was there in the Holy Land. But I guess, but yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just interesting to think about. And God, the guy who he was trying to, like, help, but just stabbed him because he didn't get his thing up. He was like, I found strength by stabbing you, but he didn't improve himself at all. He just fucking picked up a knife and jumped a guy who wasn't fucking prepared. Like, it didn't matter that he was the strongest on the streets. He wasn't fucking ready. Just, good stuff on, like I said, but, like, again, if you connect to you a lot, like the self-improvement, the bonds, the, growing up, and, like, like, ideally, like, these kind of struggles are just a phase in your life, and they can be moved on from. And I don't know, just good messages. Yeah, I liked it. I don't think I have much else to say, or at least not that I remember right now. So thank you for listening.